Welcome, everyone. It's good to be back together again for our Sunday morning class. We've had a class now within IMCW going back to, I think, about 2003. I actually started it back in 2000. So it's always a good time for me to come back and just take this time in community and being all together. And glad that you could all be with us today. Little background: if you're new, I hope you will feel, and if you've been many times, I also hope you will feel completely welcome, that you can show up fully as who you are, whatever expression that is, whatever, the fullness of who you are, whatever you. And the class is offered by the Insight Meditation Community Washington, IMCW, and the Center for Mindful Living, which is part of IMCW, physically located in Northwest DC in Tenleytown, and maybe again will be soon with when we come out the other end of this long pandemic we've been in for, what is it, about 18 months or so. And I'm grateful, and I've said this often, but just really grateful that we can be together in this way, and that we have the ability and the opportunity to practice together and to see each other and connect with each other in this way at a time when it's not so easy to. It's much more difficult to be together in person. And so I'm grateful that we're here together. And what we'll, again, just the format of the class, very straightforward. We'll begin in a couple of minutes with a guided meditation. Give us an opportunity to pause and create a space for whatever's arising, and to open to our experience as we do. And then we'll have a talk, and the theme today is on training the mind, and how our practices can help us cultivate skillful ways of being present, of training our mind, of inclining our mind towards what's going to lead to greater freedom and happiness, and to not go in those directions that lead us to more suffering, to more unhappiness, to more dukkha, to more suffering. So have a talk, and then we'll Emily will lead us in some movement, and then we'll have some sharing. We'll see how time is today, whether we go into smaller groups or we do the sharing within the full group, and then we'll finish off with a short meditation and some announcements. So again, very warm welcome to each and every one of you. And let's take some time to pause. So I invite you to have the meditation. We'll invite you to find a posture that's comfortable and relaxed. So sitting with the back straight, our physical posture very, very closely connected to our, the way our mind is experiencing. what's here, that the more we can sit in a way that's dignified, alert, at ease, the more the mind will also come to mirror and it kind of embody those qualities too, and vice versa. The more we calm our mind, the more the body tends to also kind of settle and align. So just letting the back be straight, maybe invite the shoulders to relax. Let the chest be open so you can breathe easily. If you're comfortable, you can let your eyes close, let your attention come inward. And you might consciously invite your attention to drop out of the thinking mode, where we tend to spend a lot of our time in thoughts and plans and memories, etc. And just let your attention come into the body, feeling your body, feeling your buttocks and your thighs connected with the surface beneath you, your feet, your hands touching the floor, touching maybe your lap or your knees. Consciously dropping down into the body. Letting yourself arrive and settle. You might let your attention come to your breathing. Again, just by noticing how your breath is. And you could invite it to deepen, maybe take some longer, deeper breaths to help you relax and settle, maybe a little bit more. Breathing in, calming the body. Breathing out, calming the mind. The breath is really a powerful vehicle for helping us check in with our overall sense of well-being on one hand, or stress or worry on the other. And just using the breath consciously to relax the body and the mind can be very helpful. It's taking a few longer, deeper breaths. As well as using the breath as an anchor or focus for our attention. It's letting the attention rest in the breathing in and breathing out. And then coming back when the mind has gone off, as it will, from time to time, sometimes a lot. It can also be helpful to invite a smile to the face as another way of sending a message of care, of ease to our body and to our nervous system. It's hard at the same time to smile and be stressed or angry. it tends to, one replaces the other. But the smile can help us relax and step out of the stressed and sometimes the kind of survival mode, the fight or flight mode. Just letting yourself be here. Whatever helps you to be here. If we're experiencing something challenging, a simple gesture of putting a hand on your heart, maybe a hand on the belly, can really send a message to our brain, to our consciousness that we can relax. This moment is okay. We can take refuge in the truth in this moment. And opening to what's present right now in the body, in the heart, the mind. Now, are there any guests that are present right now? Anything present that you might feel like pushing away, not liking this? If there are, see if you can just invite some space to open up, to hold that, to hold what's difficult. Maybe a painful thought or emotion, or a difficult bodily feeling. How is it to just let it come, let it be, and when it's ready, let it go. It can be helpful to think of this practice as not being about getting rid of anything, but rather choosing not to feed certain states, not to fuel them. If there's worried thoughts in the mind, not to throw more fuel on the fire so that one thought leads to another and leads to another. Just instead, kind of choose to pause that, stream of thinking, stories in the mind, worries in the mind, and just come back. What am I aware of right now? What's present? Just meeting what's here with awareness, with mindfulness, with kindness, with compassion. Share Martha Postlethwaite's poem Clearing, which can be helpful to kind of remind us of what we're doing in this practice. He says, do not try to save the whole world or do anything grandiose. Instead, create a clearing in the dense forest of your life and wait there patiently until the song that is yours alone to sing falls into your open, cupped hands and you recognize and greet it. Only then, only then will you know how to give yourself to this world so worthy of rescue. So it can be helpful to think of creating a space, what we're doing, creating a space in our lives, in the dense forest, and waiting, the silence, the stillness, just to see what comes, what arises, maybe what insights or awareness might come out of the stillness, out of the mystery. So that then we might go back into our days, into our life with more care or more compassion, more insight. We're living in a time that's not an easy one. I think for many of us, it's when we look at what's going on around us in the country and in the world. It's a lot of suffering, a lot of things that feel like they're going in worrying directions, and it's very easy for the mind to get caught up, to get caught up in worry, or if we think other people are doing bad things, we create separation around that. And this is an opportunity really to step out of the stories of the mind about how things are and how people are and how the world is or should be, and just open to the simplicity of this moment, of this breath, this being here. Opening to what's present right now, what's calling for attention. And feeling ourselves not alone, not isolated, but really part of community. This community, holding and supporting each other in our practice. So you might feel yourself here, but supported by everyone else. Particularly if you're going through something that's painful or difficult. Making space for whatever is here right now. Can you meet this, whatever this is for you right now, with kindness, with acceptance? Without judgment or resistance? Can you say, yes, to this, yes to what is. If it's helpful, letting the breath be a home base, where you can rest your attention, breathing in, breathing out. Just knowing that you're here. When the mind does go off, just with kindness and with care, gently incline it back to the body, to the breath, to this moment without judgment. Dorothy Hunt says, peace is this moment without judgment. This moment in the heart space where everything that is welcome. Sharing the late beloved Mary Oliver's, one of her most loved poems, Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. Over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. As we finish off this meditation, you might just wish yourself well as you breathe in. Could be a may I be happy or safe, held in loving kindness. And then as you breathe out, wishing everyone here well. May you be safe, free from suffering. May you be held in loving kindness. Remembering Linnea's sister, Margie, I don't know if it's a soft G or a hard G, Margie or Margie Johnson, holding her and all you and all your family, Linnea, in our hearts today. And all those who are suffering loss or experiencing difficulties or pain today, holding everyone in our hearts. Thank you. And again, welcome to everyone. And if you joined us during the meditation or a little after the beginning, welcome to you and welcome to everyone. If you'd like to share anything in the chat about what you noticed or what's came up for you or what's present, please feel free to do that. And and the theme I want to reflect on today is training the mind, particularly the question of, or questions of, why it's important to train our mind and really the benefits of training the mind. We know in our own lives how important it is to learn, whether in our family, in our schools, in our religions, and in our broader culture, about kind of how to live wisely, kindly in the world, to learn about ethics and kindness and living in ways that are thoughtful, compassionate, non-harming. And we know what a difference it makes, whether it's in our own family, if you were brought up with, parents or caregivers who kind of instilled in you a sense of, the importance of kindness, importance of caring for others, of, acting in ways that are, that don't cause harm, etc. And we can also know, it's very easy to know and see the harm that comes from being raised in, say, in a culture where that isn't grounded in fundamental ways in wisdom or in kindness. You think of if you were brought up in South Africa under apartheid, just taking a somewhat extreme example, how the likelihood, or closer to home, under Jim Crow, segregation in the South, particularly, certainly until the 60s, that you would through probably no fault of your own, you would grow up with ideas and beliefs about being superior, about, people being better than other people on the basis of race, that white people are superior, and there would be all kinds of religious and biblical justifications for those spurious beliefs. And if you were raised as, the victim of in those societies, or as somebody who was in a subordinate place, if you were Black in South Africa or African American in the US South, you'd grow up, with the pain of that and the oppression of that. Maybe even, to some extent internalizing the views because they're so pervasive. And really what I'm wanting to say is that the training of our mind is really fundamental, that what we, and a lot of it comes, in almost like through osmosis. We take it in through our families, we take it in our schools, or through our religions, etc. And, just using those cultures as examples, unless there was some strong countervailing force or pressure, we probably wouldn't be called on to, to think about and question those views. Maybe something would come up as like, oh, this doesn't seem kind, or it seems contradictory to what I'm reading in the Bible or somewhere else. But for many, many people, they're just kind of views taken on as, as it were, with one's mother's milk. And it's just, been a lot of, kind of reflect a lot on that. And I don't want to go into so much the politics of that or the history of that, but just looking at this question of training the mind, in a broader, sense. In moral philosophy and in political philosophy, there have been debates for centuries. You think of Locke and Hobbes and Rousseau, and going back to the Greek philosophers, about whether human beings are innately good or innately bad. Are they innately kind? Are we innately kind and friendly and compassionate? Or are we selfish and greedy? We're probably familiar, with some of those debates, of, Rousseau talking about, people being in a kind of idyllic state of nature before, cult society comes and imposes, different ways of looking and separation. And then Hobbes, talking about life as being solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short, in a state of nature, and so you need society to enforce certain behaviors, or otherwise it's just kind of, for him, it's just a war of all against all. And looking at these, these kind of our understanding based on history, and also based on modern science and psychology. What I conclude is more in a kind of, in a Buddhist understanding, really, that we have within us capacities to do great harm, and also we have capacities to do great good. It's almost like they're seeds that are there that can be cultivated, and that our training, whether the training from our society, from our family, from our culture, or our own training, how we choose to use and train our mind. This training plays a really important role in the development of our character and of the life that we live. How we train our mind is really crucial. I shared the story, and it's probably familiar to many of you, that story of the two wolves, normally told as a grandfather, saying he has within him, this really aggressive, angry, fierce, unkind wolf within him, in his heart. And also he has a wolf in his heart that's kind and compassionate and loving and generous and grateful and caring and all of that. And the grandchild asks him, which one of these wolves wins out? And the grandfather says, the one that I feed, the one that I feed. And that metaphor, I think, for me, is a powerful one. I mean, it does really speak to me in my own experience. And I think of also what I observe of others and working with others, that what we feed really determines who we become, what we cultivate. Do we cultivate qualities that lead us to well-being and happiness? Or do we cultivate qualities that lead us to more anger or greed or a sense of separation from others? It's really, to a very large extent, I think, a choice that we make. I don't mean that it's absolutely our own choice, because we inherit a lot from our history, from our background, from our culture, from our families. But how we meet our experience, what we choose to cultivate, makes an enormous difference in terms of our happiness, in terms of our freedom. And that's really, I think, hopefully, that's an important reason why you're here today, or at anything like this, is that you have a view that we can influence how we live, that we can choose how we respond to the circumstances of our lives. They're not predetermined. What happens, in some way is what happens. There's some level of, when something's happened, there's an inevitability about what's happened. But how we respond to that, we have a great deal of, well, it's not always a great deal, we have some degree of influence over, and it'll depend on what we've cultivated before. What we cultivate now will depend on, how much we've cultivated qualities in the past that allow us to respond in a skillful and a helpful way. But again, and the metaphor that Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Vietnamese beloved teacher, speaks about, as all of us as having these seeds within us, like the two wolves, but he uses the metaphor of seeds. And, the seeds that get cultivated, the seeds that blossom, are the ones that we nurture. What are the ones that we make sure get sun and get fertilizer or whatever, get organic fertilizer, whatever, non-harming fertilizer to grow, and water and all that they need to blossom. And what do we choose not to feed, to cultivate? So his teaching is to cultivate the wholesome seeds rather than the unskillful ones, the ones that lead to suffering. And the Buddha's view was that the key to our happiness and our freedom lies in whether we train our mind. I've often said here, quoted the Buddha saying, nothing can do you more harm than an untrained mind. Nothing can do you more harm than an untrained mind. Even your worst enemy can't do you more harm than an untrained mind. And I think we know that from our own experience and from our observations, that if, those who don't train their minds, but just go, to some extent, go with their instincts, go with their passions, go with their, their desires and their cravings, will tend to cause great suffering to themselves and to others. We see that in our political life and in many other areas of life. And he said, nothing can do you more good than a trained mind. Not even your own parents who he said, we need to be more grateful for our parents, however, whatever they did, more grateful than really to anyone for what they did to bring us into the world, etc. That may not always be easy for everyone. But nothing can do you more good than a trained mind. So as I say, without training, the mind will tend to gravitate towards, getting more of the things we want. It will kind of gravitate to our basic instincts of, I need this, I want this, I've got to have this. And to see others as, competitors, and at times enemies who, if I don't get it, they'll get it. If they get it, I won't get it. And we get into a kind of a zero-sum game and get into separation. And wherever there's separation, there's suffering. Whenever there's a me and a you, a solid sense of separation, there's suffering. There's suffering. We experience pain in that, of unsatisfactoriness in that. So we'll tend to act selfishly, harmfully, because we think that that's what's going to help us survive and thrive. But the Buddha taught, and it's the very center of his teachings, is that, craving doesn't lead to happiness. Getting what we think we want doesn't lead to happiness. Craving just leads to more suffering. Getting what we're craving, even when we get it, it can't give us happiness for very long before we're again, oh, but I need this now. Now I need this. Because the problem was never the thing. The problem was always the energy, the craving that we, that underlying wanting, that craving that the Buddha said is the cause of suffering. The second noble truth, the cause of suffering is craving and clinging. So true happiness, he taught, and genuine freedom come from letting go of clinging, come from addressing the roots, more than addressing the symptoms, getting at that underlying energy that I need this, I've got to have this, I want this, I've got to get rid of this, I don't like this, I've got to push it away. that clinging leads to suffering, and that letting go of clinging and cultivating wholesome states, generosity, compassion, loving kindness, equanimity, joy, etc., lead to freedom of the heart. And the Buddha spoke about two central practices, and I've talked about this a fair amount at different times. These two practices of cultivating the good. He said, cultivate the good and abandon the unskillful. Normally the other way around, abandon the unskillful and cultivate the good. He said, you can do this. If I didn't think you could do it, if I thought it led to harm, I wouldn't ask you to abandon the unskillful. I wouldn't ask you to cultivate the good. So we need to train our mind to follow, if you like, tried and tested practices to free the heart and the mind. And the Buddha laid out a path of training to end suffering in our lives. And this path is, you're probably familiar with the Noble Eightfold Path, this 8 factors, 8 elements of training the mind and the heart. Training the mind. I'll actually going to just share a couple of slides here if they're handy. There you go. There we go. This is about the Four Noble Truths. The Buddha said, just as the footprint of any living being can be placed within an elephant's footprint, so too all wholesome states can be included in the Four Noble Truths. Just this teaching about suffering and the end of suffering. He said all of his teachings come back to this central teaching. And the Eightfold Path is these 8 elements are the path to the end of suffering. So I just wanted to share for a moment, a couple of moments, these 8 elements and how they support us in our practice. And just for a moment here, not getting into this in a lot of depth right now, but just to name the 3 main areas that we're training the mind in, ultimately in cultivating wisdom. Wisdom is, what the practice is really about. It's wisdom leads to freedom. Wisdom is seeing clearly. So we practice mindfulness to see clearly. This is the meaning of the word vipassana. Vipassana means seeing clearly. We cultivate these elements of the path in order to see clearly. And the 2 central as wisdom elements of the path are wise understanding and wise intention. Their wise understanding is our overall way of, excuse me, our overall way of seeing the world and seeing our experience. And the Buddha said that the most powerful way of looking at our experience is through the lens of these teachings of the 4 Noble Truths. So to look at where suffering is in our lives, where we're suffering, what's causing the suffering, what is it that's leading to the suffering, which he says is craving. So whenever I suffer, I look at, okay, what is my role in this suffering? If I'm feeling, I'm feeling bad about something, maybe I'm angry about something, or feeling angry towards somebody, somebody I've had an argument with, feeling that anger. The key is to ask ourselves, what's the cause of this suffering? What's my role in this suffering, essentially? What am I holding on to? And if I'm really experiencing the unpleasantness of that anger, I'll be able to see that there's some clinging that I'm engaged in that is keeping that suffering going. So to invite that inquiry into, what is my role in this suffering? And then to invite a letting go. So that's really wise understanding, is to see our experience through the lens or through the way of seeing of the 4 Noble Truths. Look at suffering in your own life and say, where am I suffering? And if I'm suffering, what is the cause of this suffering? What am I holding on to? And can I let go? That's the 3rd Noble Truth. Can I recognize that this suffering, this anger that I'm feeling is leading to suffering, and choose not to fuel it? Choose not to throw fuel on the fire. Maybe cultivate loving kindness or compassion and let go. And in that letting go, there's freedom. And then that's the 3rd Noble Truth. And the 4th is that there's a path, and this is the path. Cultivating wise understanding and wise intention. Out of that way of seeing comes an intentions of kindness, of care, of non-harming. And then the second main area of the Eightfold Path is this training in how to live wisely and skillfully, the ethical component of the path, called Sila in Pali. Panya is wisdom, Sila, the ethical, cultivating virtue, cultivating living wisely and kindly. And the elements there are wise speech, wise action, and wise livelihood. If we're wanting to end suffering in our lives, then it makes sense to speak in ways that are kind, that are true, that are necessary, rather than that are false, harsh, angry, etc. And to act in ways that are kind to others, that don't harm ourselves, that don't harm the world. Similarly with our livelihood. So to cultivate these qualities that will help create harmony in the world, but will also help free our own minds and hearts. This is the ethical component of the path. And then the third area is the mental training component, wise effort, which is about abandoning the unskillful and cultivating the good. Mindfulness, which is about being present to our experience, moment to moment, letting go of clinging if we're holding on, seeing the benefits of that, and through mindfulness, cultivating wisdom. And then wise concentration, training our mind, calming the mind, steadying the mind, balancing the mind, so that we're more able to see things clearly. All of these 8 elements of the Buddha's Eightfold Path are form a training of the mind and the heart to end suffering in this very life, in this very lifetime. Could be all at once, if we see things very deeply and very clearly, or it could be, as it is for most of us, step by step. As Ajahn Chah said, let go a little and you'll experience a little peace, little freedom. Let go a lot and you'll experience a lot of freedom. Let go completely and you'll experience complete peace, complete freedom. Your struggle with the world will be at an end. So this training of the heart and the mind is really it's a discipline. It's a discipline. And discipline is an interesting word. Just check in with yourself. What comes up for you when you think of this word discipline? For most of us, it has connotations that are, somewhat tight and oppressive, I think. Maybe not for everybody, but it's not so popular a word today, and understandably, because it's taken on connotations of control and punishment. I just looked up a few definitions of discipline, and one said, the practice of training people to obey rules or a code of behavior, using punishment to correct disobedience. So discipline is about punishing to correct disobedience. This was from Webster online. To punish as a way to bring about good behavior. So no wonder we don't may not like discipline, with that punitive quality to it. But I think of discipline in a much more, I hope, spacious way. It doesn't, and I think its original meaning wasn't about punishment. The word discipline comes from the Latin word disciplina, which means instruction or knowledge. Similarly, is the word discipulus. Discipulus is the word for a pupil or a disciple or a follower, discipulus in Latin. And discipline was used by Chaucer, excuse me, back in the early 1400s. He spoke of the discipline of science, the discipline of science. You could talk about the discipline of physics or the discipline of medicine. We could think of the discipline of a particular trade or craft, or military discipline or an apprenticeship as a discipline. I think of discipline in a more friendly way and a less punitive way. And I think it's helpful to think of our mindfulness and our Dharma practice as a discipline, as something, not a punitive one, because punitive almost always is counterproductive. Almost, maybe some very limited situations where the Buddha has an example in his teachings where, when everything else has failed, when you're working with difficult mind states, he gives a metaphor of a wrestler who's stronger than their opponent, pinning the other one down until it submits, until the other one submits. And he says to do that. But he doesn't tend to talk about that a lot. And it's a fairly rare thing. And I think it's kind of a last resort, you know, because most of what our current thinking in psychology and therapy and also mindfulness is that kind of, you know, kind of more oppressive, repressive approach doesn't tend to help. You know, as Jung said, what you resist persists. You know, that repression actually kind of tends to keep things going. So thinking of our practice as a discipline, and predominantly as a self-discipline, a discipline of knowing what we want, because we need to know what we want in order to cultivate the discipline, knowing what's important to us, being willing to make an effort, you know, to put in the effort. There's no way that it would be meaningful to talk about a discipline that didn't involve some effort, some real practice, some willingness to make life, you know, to do things that are not simple and not easy for ourselves, because we know we won't train our minds or even our bodies without that discipline, without that sense of pushing ourselves, you know, at least to our limits, and then kind of, you know, extending those limits through that discipline. It involves being intentional in our behavior, training ourselves, continuing to pay attention, and moving in the direction that will allow us to develop the skills, master the skills that we're learning and we're cultivating. So all of these are really the elements of the Eightfold Path. You know, all of what I've just mentioned are about our understanding, about our intention, about our effort, about our awareness, about focusing the mind. So our practice, you can see, is a practice of self-discipline. It's also supported by teachers, you know, teachers who have passed on, maybe teachers who are around now, and also by fellow practitioners, you know, that we're practicing together in community. We're learning from each other. We're growing together. And that's guided by a path that the Buddha laid out. So the path is already there. You know, it's kind of like you could think of it almost like a virtual path it's all laid out like the lights are shone upon it. But it only actually becomes real by walking on it and by engaging in the path and engaging in our experience, with our experience, and modifying what we're learning and seeing based on our experience. So being kind of having this dialectical relationship, this, you know, iterative, you know, mutual relationship, shifting based on our experience. You know, so it has the element of training in the meditative skills to train the mind, you know, just as we do in meditation, of when the mind goes off, we come back again, we consciously bring it back. We cultivate qualities that are ennobling, that lead to happiness and to well-being. You know, through the practices of the Eightfold Path. So we cultivate these practices. You know, often it's through repetition. We do it and then we do it again, and then we do it again. The mind goes off and we come back again. And the more kindly and more gently we come back, and the more we repeat that, you know, the mind needs that repetition. And a lot of the work that I've done around habit change is about that recognition that we need to be aware, but we also need to keep repeating doing things. This is a discipline, isn't it? Just like a weightlifter, somebody who wants to strengthen their body by lifting weights, they have to keep repeating it. You know, not very good. Just I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to lift a 30-pound weight, put it down. One thing I do, come back a month later. Not going to change very much, is it? But if I go there and I find what's a challenging weight, and I do 10, and maybe next time I do 12, and then the next time I might get up to 15, and then maybe I'd add a little bit of weight, and then that practice, that repetition, it's not that different with our minds. We repeat, we come back, we begin again, we train the mind, we cultivate compassion, loving kindness, all these wholesome qualities. And we do that in our moment-to-moment practice, knowing where we're going. So we're in the present, but we're also conscious and cognizant of where we're going. You know, what am I doing this for? What is it? You know, I'm doing this to wake up. I'm doing this to alleviate suffering. I'm doing this to cultivate freedom of the heart. So knowing, you know, discipline. Somebody, there was a sharing in the chat. Let me just bring that up. Yeah, Diane shared that, and I'd heard that. Rebecca had shared it with me, and that I found helpful too. Discipline is remembering what you want. Thank you for that. And Linnea says, discipline is the skill to be able to do something again and again to improve. A dancer needs to have discipline, a pianist, a person learning a language. That's my understanding of discipline from growing up in the 50s, nothing to do with punishment. Yeah, and that's my view as well, that we need this consistent practice that is moment to moment to do what we need to do, but also knowing where we're going, knowing what the goal of is. We're not getting out of the present moment, getting caught up in the goal, so we lose our present moment experience. It's really holding both of those at the same time. We need to know where we're going. Or as Yogi Berra said, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace different. You're somewhere else. So we'll end up somewhere else. So paying attention with kindness, with acceptance, without judgment, as part of a path with a direction. And as I said, calibrating our practice and our actions based on the feedback of direct experience. So we check in with, what am I noticing? And maybe we make a change based on what, you know, I'm trying too hard right now. Okay, let my you know, foot off the brake, as it were, and relax back. Think of it as, I think another good metaphor is of sailing a boat, you know, or a yacht, you know, a sailboat. And I haven't done a lot of sailing in my life, so I'm not all that familiar with the terminology, but, you know, tacking and jibing and doing what we need to do to kind of calibrate our direction into where we want to go in terms of the way the wind's blowing, the waves, you know, the speed we're going, all of those things, making the changes we need to make. That's really what we're doing in our practice. You know, and that's really the discipline. That's the discipline that we're cultivating. And just to finish up, I want to just name some practices that I think can be really helpful in cultivating this discipline. And the first is to see the Four Noble Truths as a key. I've shared this a few months ago and taught a course on the Four Noble Truths. And I just find this metaphor of a key, and it's one that came to me as I shared, you know, just as a really helpful metaphor, at least for me, a key to unlocking our suffering. You know, that the Four Noble Truths can be a way at just applying it to our experience. Where am I suffering? Where am I experiencing some kind of unsatisfactoriness, something I want to change, something I don't like? And then that's the first noble truth. The second noble truth being, what am I holding on to? What is my role in this suffering? What am I clinging to? What am I craving? What am I holding on to? What am I believing? And when I see that, then I'm in a position to let go. May not be easy, but through training, through discipline, through practice, I can begin to let go. And the letting go, that's the second noble truth, that craving is the cause of suffering. The third, that letting go leads to freedom. So when I see clearly and let go, then I feel that I experience that freedom. The freedom that comes from moving from a place of this person is a pain in the butt, I hate them, they're making my life a misery, to seeing maybe this is another human being who has their own suffering, and that if I can just bring compassion to myself and to them, then I can let go of that view that's holding me in this separation and suffering. Bad person doing bad things. Okay, can I let go of that? Can I see it in a broader way? And can I let go? And can I experience freedom? And can I cultivate these qualities that I showed in the slides, the Noble Eightfold Path, to help, through cultivating wise effort, wise mindfulness, wise concentration, wise speech, action, livelihood, etc. One of the most helpful metaphors for me, I think is a really powerful one, is the metaphor of the two arrows. The two arrows, the first arrow and the second arrow. The first arrow is the quote, and I'd say quote, put it in quotes, the bad thing, the thing that we're interpreting as bad that happens. Ouch, that hurts, Somebody says something that feels like a put down. Ouch, maybe, maybe not. The ouch in itself isn't suffering. The ouch is just the pain of the reaction to something, pain of being hit hard there's pain, but it only turns into suffering when we add something to the experience. So the second arrow is when we add to the experience, saying, how could they say that to me? Or why did this happen to me? Or why am I always doing this? This is the second arrow. The second arrow, without the second arrow, there isn't suffering. Even a quote, what we might say is a bad thing, isn't suffering without the addition of the second arrow. So ask yourself, where am I adding a second arrow in my life? Or a third arrow, because sometimes we add arrows to arrows. We feel angry and then we blame ourselves for our anger. And then we judge ourselves and blame somebody else for causing it, etc. It just kind of builds up on itself. So the second arrow is a metaphor. And then what I mentioned before, remembering that we don't need to get rid of anything. We don't need to get rid of anything. We just need to stop fueling what leads us to suffering. Stop throwing fuel on the fire that just keeps the flames burning. Let go of that. Stop, don't do that. Stop feeding the unskillful roots of suffering. What put the, greed, hatred, greed, aversion, and delusion. Stop feeding them, and they will fade of themselves. So we don't need to get rid of. We just need to stop struggling. As Chogyam Trungpa said, there's no need to struggle to be free. Ending the struggle is itself freedom. So in the same way, ending the fueling of our unskillful mind states, etc., is what's needed. So think about that too. Think about, am I trying to get rid of anything? Can I turn that to, okay, can I just let that be? Welcome the guests, let them go, let them go. Keep on practicing in that way. So this went on a little bit long today. So what we'll do is, Emily, if you would lead us in some movement, and then we'll just do a little bit of group sharing in the larger group. So Heavenly, you can breathe.
So let me invite you to stand up and sway from side to side, and just sway your arms as well. Acknowledging the space around you. And then come to center, turn your palms out and raise your arms up to cultivate the good. The sky, the sun, all of the universe and bring that to your heart. And cultivate the kindness, everyone here together, sharing the teachings, and bring that to your heart. And cultivate the abundance of the earth, all of the animals here, and bring that to your heart. And then come to Cactus Arms. And on an exhale, dropping your arms and rising. Dropping your arms and lifting them up. And dropping your arms. And then extend them out. Reaching your head up, your chest, opening your chest. And then come into a forward fold, bending at the hip crease, bringing your hands above your knees. Take a breath in here, flat back, and then dropping the head and the shoulders and the middle back as much as you might like. Some of you may touch the ground, but you don't have to. Just allow the pull of gravity to lengthen your spine, creating space among the vertebrae. And breathe into your rib cage. And exhale, soften. And then bring your hands back above your knees and roll up your spine, drawing your shoulders up to your ears and rolling them back and rolling them forward. And then individually. And then the other way. And come to center and bring your hands to heart center and release to the sky, release to the room and to the earth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you. And please, if again, if anyone, if you'd like to share anything in the chat, what's coming up for you, anything about your practice, please feel free. And what we'll do today, just for time, we'll have some sharing in the full group. So if anyone would like to share anything, which could be something that you've experienced, or it could be a question, anything you'd like to raise, please feel free to raise your hand. There's a way of doing that through the participants. Yeah, sorry.
I'm so sorry, it's Hadley. If people are going to share in the larger group, should I stop the recording? I don't know.
Larger group. I would say just don't spotlight the person, and so feel free if somebody would like to share, could share in the chat or share in person. But yes, you will be, unless you want it to be something that's off camera, it will be part of the session. Maybe that's inhibiting. Well, let's see. So if anyone, you can raise your hand in the how do people raise their hands? Cassie, you're good at this, I know.
I think they go down to reactions.
Yeah, you use the reactions button.
Oh, reactions. Okay. Oh, raise hand is there. Yeah, gotcha. Thank you. So Francine has asked, how do you see your mind focused in the face of physical pain? Do you mean by that, how do you work with the physical pain?
Yes.
How do you cultivate a discipline of doing that, Francine?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the basic practice is what we do here really every week, essentially, you know, the invitation to open to what's present. So I'll say that kind of the general instruction, which would work for pain and other things as well, is to do what we do in the meditation, which is to make space for that feeling, to be aware of it. You know, if it's something that's strong and predominant in awareness, to really let the attention go there, let it move from the breath or wherever else was before, and come to the area of pain, and to go in as closely as you can to the pain, so that you're experiencing it in a very direct way. Because a lot of what we experience with pain is our reaction to the pain. Often that's the story in the mind about not liking the pain. And so we spend a lot of time in the reaction to the pain rather than in the direct experience of it. So allowing ourselves to really feel the pain, to feel the sensations, you know, as much as we can without the story. I've got a quote here from Anne Morrow Lindbergh, who is a poet and an author, also happened to be married to the airman from the 30s and onward, Lindbergh, whatever. But this I found powerful. She's speaking about pain. She says, go with the pain, let it take you. Open your palms and your body to the pain. And this is kind of fairly intense or, you know, strong pain. It comes in waves like a tide, and you must be open as a vessel lying on the beach, letting it fill you up and then retreating, leaving you empty and clear. With a deep breath, it has to be as deep as the pain. One reaches a kind of inner freedom from pain, as though the pain were not yours, but your body's. The spirit lays the body on the altar. So what we're really doing is we're allowing the direct experience to come, letting it come, letting it be, letting it go, as we do with other phenomena, other experiences in meditation. And we're cultivating that capacity and building that capacity through that kind of that discipline of kindness, compassion, and awareness, to allow ourselves to really feel what we're feeling, letting go as much as we can of the story about it. And then different practices can be more helpful at different times. Sometimes it's to go in really close, to go in almost on a micro level to it. You know, what am I really noticing? Is it tingling? Is it squeezing? Is it pinching? Is it pulsing? Is it throbbing? And just maybe, if it's helpful, even naming those things and noticing if it gets stronger, if it gets weaker for a while, does it change? Noticing when we get pulled into the story and coming back again. So it can be going in a very micro kind of way, but at other times it might be opening a space, you know, like a mind like the sky, where we can experience the pain, but we're also experiencing lots of other things going on. There's sounds, there's feelings, there's sensations, there's tastes, there's thoughts. All of this is going on, so that we're kind of experiencing the pain within a much larger context. And that can often be very helpful in working at it, because when we're in the middle of it at times, particularly when we're in a very reactive place, it can seem like this is the only thing in the world. To see that it's not the only thing in the world, and that it's coming and it's going and it's not lasting, can be helpful. So there's different skillful ways we can work with the pain, but those are some of them, involving mindfulness, involving compassion, bringing in compassion, cultivating equanimity. So we're really cultivating the broad range of Dharma skills that we cultivate through these practices, through the Eightfold Path and through the heart practices, etc. Any response to that, Francine?
Yeah, I've also heard that the best thing to do is to redirect your mind, because if that's kind of the law of it. You'll get more what you focus on. That if you're focusing on pain, then you just get more of it, as opposed to not denying it. I mean, if it's there, it's there, but not bringing more to you. So how does that dovetail with what you've said?
It's another way. I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, because what we're talking about is there isn't one way. We know this from our own experience. One day something can help, but another day something almost the opposite can help. These are what we call skillful means, and any skillful means will be skillful for a particular place and a particular time. It's not that there's no magic formula, that we say, oh, I can always just get this talisman and this is always going to work for me. If you try and do that, you'll experience suffering, because yes, it'll work some of the time, but then, oh, it's not working. And then what do I have if it's not working? The thing that I always worked for me. Think of it much more as a range of skillful means, different tools in our toolkit that we can bring. And that one of redirecting can be a very helpful one. It can be taking the energy away from when it has, particularly when it's become a kind of tunnel vision, where we get pulled back in all the time. Okay, what happens when? And the spacious awareness is a version of that, really. It's an invitation to kind of enlarge things. What you're saying is redirect. All of these are good, and there are others too. Those are just some of the most common and helpful ones. Okay, so you're not just saying no, the only way. Okay, great. Yeah, and I'm not just saying just be with, because that's a be with is a kind of foundational practice, but even be with is a skillful means. It's not an absolute every time, because, for example, if we're dealing with trauma, being with, often it just doesn't work. It just, the brain doesn't allow us to just be with. It goes, F you, I'm off. Excuse me. It's like, no, I'm not staying with this. I'm not. I will die if I stay with this. That's kind of the message. So being with, ultimately we are working to be with, but often it takes very gradual, gentle ways of learning that we can be with. So a lot of the skillful practices around trauma are ways to learn to be with, but not by jumping right into the middle of, but by gradually. One of the trainings I've done and worked with is Somatic Experiencing, which is very much about redirecting and bringing back, redirecting and bringing back. They call it titration and pendulation. Titration a little bit at a time, pendulation, the kind of back to a more pleasant resource place, and then back to the difficult place when we have the space to do that. So it's really a variety of skillful means, depending on the situation, depending on the context. Thank you, Francine. Yeah, that's helpful.
Hugh, Kirsten has had her hand raised for quite a while.
Kirsten. Want to unmute yourself? Yeah.
And that's okay. Thank you, Everly. What came up for me, Hugh, with this topic really is that whole phrase of don't take it personally, because I've struggled with that phrase my whole life, meaning that it feels as if I don't take it personally, then who am I, right? It's like as if I don't exist, right? So there's a defensiveness to it. But I do get that when I get into a space of objectivity where I can watch what's going on, right? Which is not taking it personally, right? It's just, oh, look at that. I'm angry or I'm reacting or, oh, there was an interesting thought, right?
Yeah.
So I found that that's kind of a practice, but it's kind of your comment to the word discipline, right? Like what comes up when you hear it. And it's kind of the same thing for me when I hear don't take it personally, because it's like, Jesus, how can I not take it personally? This guy just attacked me, verbally, right? So
right.
That's still a hard one I'm working. Yeah.
No, it's a huge one in our lives, I think. I like to come back to the story of, and it's very much related to what you're saying, Kirsten, the story of somebody rowing in their boat on so let's say a lake, and there's this other boat coming directly towards them, and the person can see that this is going to crash. You stupid idiot, watch where you're going, open your damned eyes, all of this. And then the person in the boat sees that there's no one in the boat. It's an empty boat. And so ultimately, and I use ultimately advisedly, ultimately it's all empty. All of the boats are empty. Donald Trump is empty. And I don't mean that in a pejorative way. I mean it in a Dharma way. It's all empty. It's only our taking it personally, as you said, that makes it into suffering. If otherwise, Donald Trump or whoever it might be is like a volcano or an earthquake or whatever, it's a phenomenon, not denying it exists, but does it have to be suffering? It's only suffering when I take it personally, when somehow I get hooked on whoever it is, whatever it is, that leaves me suffering. That wonderful term I've shared from Pema Chodron, Shempa, that hook. I'm hooked on that political figure that I don't like, that they're doing these bad things and that. Yes, they may be doing harmful things, but do I need to suffer? And if I'm not hooked, then I'm much more available to respond wisely to the harmful things that are happening. That's the kind of the paradox of it, isn't it? At the heart of these teachings, that the more we let go of wanting, certain things to be a certain way, the more things will go in the direction that we want them to go in. But we have to let go in order for them to be able to do that. So that they don't take things personally. I think it's a great thing. I like those 4 agreements. Don't, be impeccable with your word. Don't take things personally. Don't always remind me of them. The ones I mean. The 4 agreements. The 4. Always be impeccable with your. Don't make assumptions. Don't take things personally. Don't make assumptions. What's the first? Always do your best. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah and Christine. Always do your best. Yeah, those are good little maxims to think about. Am I taking things personally? Am I making assumptions? Am I doing my best? Yeah. All right. Well, let's just time-wise, I think it would be good to have a short meditation and some announcements to finish. So invite you again to just to take a pause, create a clearing, a space, letting yourself settle and arrive again. And just begin by noticing what's present, what's here right now. Can I make space for this? Maybe there's tightness in the belly. Or maybe the mind is very active with what we've been talking about and sharing. Just let yourself open to it. Open to what's present. Arrive and settle. And meet whatever is here with kindness. It's a simple gesture of putting your hand on your heart can be a really powerful way of connecting with yourself, connecting with any pain or suffering you might be experiencing. All with kindness. Wishing yourself well. Appreciating your effort in coming today, coming together in community, practicing together. Wishing yourself well. And wishing, as you breathe out, wishing everyone here well. May you be happy. May you be safe. May you be held in loving kindness, filled with loving kindness. May you live with ease and with kindness. This poem, again from Antonio Machado, Spanish poet, called Walker in English. Walker, your footsteps are the road and nothing more. Walker, there is no road. The road is made by walking. Walking, you make the road, and turning to look behind, you see the path you never again will step upon. Walker, there is no road, only foam trails on the sea. Walker, there is no road, only foam trails on the sea.